New Roadhog rework just dropped, and it's something. Now, I'm going to go very in-depth about my problems with this rework, and I just hate being negative, guys. I'm not going to lie. I want to pause the video just for a second here. I really don't like being negative here. I think there's a lot of great things to be excited about with Overwatch, the new rank system update, a lot of the new characters coming out. BlizzCon had a lot of really exciting information, and even things like the Sombra rework, which I feel like missed the mark in some ways, did make the character more dynamic and more fun to play, and was overall a step in the right direction for the right character. So I want to be grateful for that. A lot of the new communication that we've been having, but I'm just gonna call it like I see it. I'm not gonna try to be negative. I'm not gonna try to be positive. It's good. It's good. The rank rework system looks awesome. I'm not gonna sit here and be doomsday about it, right? The Microsoft buyout and a lot of the other things, even like the K-pop collaboration is exciting in terms of. I'm not a big K-pop fan, but it's exciting in terms of the marketing side of things. It was a great marketing scheme, and it looked like it did a great job. And that's good news for somebody that's interested in the longevity of Overwatch. But the Roadhog rework is bad. It's not a rework. It's a big flop, and I'm going to talk about exactly why. Now, because I don't only want to be negative here, I also want to give my own solution to the problem, which is going to involve a tank rework project, which we're going to be doing live on stream this coming Saturday. More details on that at the end of this video. But I don't like being negative without proposing a solution, and that's something that I've been working on with DPS support and tank. And like I said, we're going to talk more about that at the end of the video. But let's talk about what's the problem with the Roadhog quote-unquote rework. Let's go right to the patch notes released yesterday, November 14th, and discuss what was actually attempted to be fixed here. So, developer comments, the broad goal of the Roadhog rework was to improve his frontline presence. Now, that should already be disturbing you if you know anything about the fundamental design of tanks. Tanks that have a frontline presence always have some form of direct damage mitigation, whether it's a matrix or shield or something along those lines. Even characters like D.Va that have relatively strong frontline presence are still not primarily frontline presence because they don't have the big fat shield. Characters like Sigma, characters like Reinhardt, characters like Ramantra, they have the HP, they have the armor, they have the consistent damage and of consistently available damage mitigation that Roadhog has not and still does not have. Improve his frontline presence in the battlefield as a tank hero, and reduce the frustration enemy players now with the consistently deadly his hook combo has been in the past. Okay, so this issue is, I guess, they don't like people getting frustrated with people getting hooked one shot. I think that's kind of a tricky way of approaching things because that's the only times when Roadhog has been effective is when that hook one shot was a threat. And in many ways, that hook one shot is still a threat. While it's tricky to do, it's still a threat. And I'm not really sure what the point of this statement was. I don't feel like any of these issues are actually addressed with this rework. So we're 0 for 2 here. Roadhog's previous scrap gun primary and secondary has been reworked into one primary fire shot that's still most effective at close range, but also deals more reliable damage from further away now. We'll talk about this one. This one is going to require a little bit more testing, but I also feel that this was a failure. His Take a Breather has been changed to a resource-based ability that's been moved to secondary fire for a more convenient control scheme. It can be used more frequently, but needs to recharge its resource over time, increasing its flexibility as a tanking tool and making it not as easy to counter. Hit or miss with this one. I think overall a pretty decent change, probably the most positive change to say about the rework, but requires a lot more testing to know for sure. He now has an ability called Pigpen, which is a deployable trap that activates when enemies are nearby, dealing damage and slowing them. This enables Roadhog to have control over a wider area. It doesn't. And with a little bit of pre-planning, can be used to either help protect his allies. It doesn't. Or further enhance the effectiveness of his hook combo. Yes, but situationally so. We're not going to go through all the changes here. We're going to talk about that more in-game and just basically just showcase exactly what has changed with the Roadhog. So if you guys have been living under a rock and aren't quite familiar, I'm going to give you a quick TLDR. There's going to be other hog mains that will probably do a better job of me this, so I'm not going to put a lot of focus on it. Basically, right-click, which was the medium-range explosion weapon, is now gone. Left-click now has a shotgun spread. You see that tri-shot kind of in the middle. It's more of like a quad shot. That's the effective right-click or medium-range shotgun, which if you hit it right smack dab in the middle, it does pretty decent damage at range if you hit the shots. It's not as effective at right click, and that's a very important point, which we'll get to later when it comes to poking, but it maintains the shotgun identity while still having some of that medium-ish range poke. Hook is still the exact same. Heal is now a resource meter like Matrix. When it gets interrupted or stopped, you look at the bottom right. That's a 1 second cooldown before I can use it again. And it takes a little bit of time before it starts to regenerate. That's very important if you're looking to play this character effectively. The maximum amount of heal is slightly increased, but the damage reduction is slightly decreased as well. So I don't remember the exact number of damage reduction, maybe 40, 45%, maybe 50%. I'll have to actually go back and check. But now it's only 30% damage reduction on that Take a Breather to kind of balance the fact that it's more effectively available. Now, the big thing that everyone's talking about, of course, is the Pigpen, which we talked about the direct damage, and then also the slow and the small DOT while they're standing inside the Pigpen. Now, this is also destroyable, and it is only detonated when somebody walks over it or around it, just like a Junkrat trap. Now, All that being said, this character functions pretty much exactly the same. And this is why this is a problem. So let's go about what our Roadhog rework needed to address. They talk about frontline presence. They talked about the hook one-shot combo. We could talk about all those things, but I'm going to talk about what I feel like the Roadhog rework needed, and I think many of you guys will agree. I think the one-dimensional playstyle of what Roadhog could do, which was only threatening people with a hook and direct damage, and that's all that he did. There was no other sort of dynamic. There was no sort of protecting his team. There's no sort of I'm allowed to take angles or take different offense. There's no dynamics with how his weapons and his hook. It was basically just you hook and you kill, you hook and you kill. In fact, the most interesting and most important dynamic for Roadhog came actually within that weapon, the choice of using left click or right click, where it was better to use the shotgun or go for the skill shot with right click. I'm using right click here to signify secondary fire, that medium range explosive projectile. Not only was that a skillful or difficult shot to land, but is extremely effective in the right set of circumstances, and that is now gone. Now we're replaced with a weapon that is at best a homogenization of the previous weapons, but doesn't quite have the same peak, especially at the mid-range poke. He still functions the exact same. He does not have more frontline focus. He's just as easy to poke out, to CC, to stun, to nade, to sleep, to punch, to rock. All the things that plagued Roadhog in the previous iteration are the exact same struggles as the current Roadhog. He does no dynamic in playstyle. And that's the problem here, is that there's only one thing that Roadhog can do right now, which is hook and shoot people. And the frontline presence is irrelevant when any sort of CC and counter thrown your way completely shuts you down. So Pigpen, surely that provides some sort of a frontline presence, right? It's an AoE slow. Well, no, because anything that's deployed on the front line is immediately broken. One-dimensional playstyle, lack of playstyle dynamics, frustrating to play with, frustrating to play against, and also struggles immensely versus counters. He's either very, very oppressive, can dominate the lobby, but then if you go Discord, Ana, Hanzo, Mei, Orisa, Sigma, anything that can crowd control him, even a little bit, this isn't just an Ana problem, pretty much shuts him down and limits his counterplay options by a lot. And see, that's the big problem with Roadhog. Back with the previous iteration of the Roadhog, if they went a counter, unlike characters like Wrecking Ball or Winston or Diva or Zarya, who definitely have issues with counters as well, those characters at least have some wiggle room, whether it's their mobility, their damage mitigation, or just their utility. They have ways of playing around those counters and outplaying them and counterplaying them, even if it's just avoiding the counter as it is. You see, a Winston into Orisa can be a tricky matchup, but you have the mobility to avoid the Orisa. And that's something that Roadhog doesn't have. Roadhog doesn't have the capability to consistently outplay his counters. And this new Pigpen ability, the heal change, doesn't really do a lot to change that. So let's talk about each of these changes in detail. I'm going to talk with the trap first. I've kind of already brought it up, but it does not really address the issues with Roadhog. It doesn't help his play versus counters. The frontline presence, quote unquote, that it provides in terms of the slow and the damage isn't really reliable. It's way too easy to break. It's way too easy to void. And the damage aspect is basically irrelevant on the tank line. The best use for trap that I could find out from my hours of playing last night was essentially using it to facilitate a one-shot combo where you're able to get some damage off of the trap by pulling them in. I didn't even do it there, but you can actually pull them into the trap and shoot them, which facilitates for a more consistent one-shot combo. But again, while that's a skill play, we love to see it, it's something that, again, just leans into his niche and just makes him, I guess, a little bit better at that niche. Outside of that, it isn't really all that useful. There are some nuances that will come into play as Roadhog OTPs get better and better at the character. There will be find more uses for the ability, but as it is right now, it's entirely one-dimensional and doesn't provide a lot of dynamics and nuance, and I think, again, that's a problem. Even if there is a niche circumstance or a quick adjustment you can make to get a little bit more value, maybe you could even use it in a situation where you're being dove, you put it down, and it prevents people from chasing you down. The nuance, the niches in which that's actually useful make it an almost entirely useless ability outside of the thing that it does, and it does very well. So it doesn't address issues. It doesn't give frontline presence. It doesn't give him any sort of interesting anti-die for protecting backline dynamic. It's just not good. Heal change. Overall, I do think this was a decent change. Again, it doesn't really change playstyle. It doesn't really improve his playstyle in any impactful way. And it definitely still leaves him relatively vulnerable to CC. While it is... I guess it's really hard to say whether it's a net positive or net negative change. I would say it's probably a net positive change. But the problem here is that you could start your heal, get crowd controlled, and then because of that 1 second cooldown, anytime that you get crowd controlled, the heal is put on CD. And because the damage reduction is lower than the previous one, you get naded, you actually wish you had your old vape because you want that old damage reduction back. Oftentimes with Hog, you're so fragile, so vulnerable. If you get crowd controlled, even just the 1 second cooldown of duration there could be absolutely lethal when it comes to being able to keep yourself alive. So while it does help in some ways, it's also weaker in other ways, and it's not going to really change any of the problems that Hog has fundamentally had. I'm not going to complain about the change. I think it's okay, but again, it's not the fix that we needed here. We needed more than this. Overall, though, I still found myself on a one-shot cycle, but the big thing here is that I felt like I actually lost the mid-range poke that allowed me to do something when I didn't have hook. Playing versus poke compositions when I didn't have hook felt absolutely awful yesterday. I had basically, I could feel a tangible loss in poke, actual threat of a one-shot or any consistent pressure. My trap was obviously completely useless, and the heal change didn't help me all that much. So there were certain compositions, certain situations when there just wasn't a whole lot that I could do. And with the new rework, you'd think there would be at least more dynamics. With the Samba rework, it felt a lot more fun, it felt a lot more engaging. When while it wasn't a very strong character, it still felt like there was ways that I could adjust and ways that I could play around, even just through like counterplay. And I just did not feel the same thing with Roadhog yesterday. There were some situations where I felt very strong, and there's some situations where I felt very weak. And that's exactly how the previous iteration of Roadhog felt. And I feel like I said, I really feel like that right-click change, the weapon change was a negative change. I really feel like it was a negative change. I feel like when you have a weapon that actually required you to choose the right shot for the right situation, and if you had the mechanics for it, could give you a one-shot, right? That was what made, I mean, not exactly a one-shot, but it was definitely something that gave skill expression and dynamic to the character. And now that is actually gone, and we have a much more homogenized, much easier to use weapon that's a lot less effective in the right circumstances. I still found myself getting completely destroyed by nade, by doom punch, by discord, by just any sort of poke damage at all, sleep, rock, javelin, even things like Maywall. A lot of those things were very difficult to play, and I ended up having to play very, very baity, basically playing around cover 24/7, never engaging, baiting a cooldown, disengaging, baiting cooldown, disengaging, baiting cooldown, disengaging. And while that is definitely part of the tank experience as a whole, I play a lot of the other tanks. I play a lot of the other tanks that get screwed by crowd control, and I've never felt more helpless when dealing with those abilities than I have when I've played Roadhog. And a lot of the things is we talk about like, okay, Ana is definitely a big problem, Discord's definitely a big problem. But again, I had problems with Diva. I had problems with Doomfist. I had problems with Orisa. I had problems with Sigma. I had problems with Bastion. And I had problems with Cassidy. And I had problems, and Hanzo spam, and Maywall. And you go down the list, and even something like a Sojourn building constant rail. And so even when I was winning games, and I won 5 games and lost 4, it still felt frustrating. It still felt difficult. It felt like I had to outsmart and basically outpatience the enemy team without any sort of direct action. It felt very similar to how Mauga felt in Quick Play, where all it took was one poke hero or one form of crowd control, and I basically had to play unbelievably patient. And as we've talked about many, many, many times, that's not the gameplay loop that we want, especially from reworked characters. This is supposed to be better, not supposed to feel the exact same. And so does Overwatch have an environmental problem when it comes to the environment that Roadhog has played? Yes, maybe, but I don't think it's smart to have a character that has 0 damage mitigation, regardless of whether we're going to nerf anti-nade or regardless if we're going to nerf spam damage or crowd control as well. I agree that we should, but this character is gatekeeping any sort of utility or the effectiveness of any CDs, because every single time that we introduce any form of CD or CC or burst damage, we always have to ask ourselves, well, how is Roadhog going to deal with that? And to me, that's more of a problem with Roadhog than it is with just the environment that he's in. New ability is useful for the one-shot combo, doesn't add any significant nuance here. I mean, I was really disappointed with Pigpen, to be honest with you guys. Like, it doesn't make the character a lot more interesting to play. It's such a long cooldown. It's so niche in its use. It's not super, super skillful, at least that I can find out right now. I will admit that there's a little bit of ignorance here, and then that might change, but my first impression isn't good, and it isn't particularly fun either. So we don't have any range. There's no significant form of damage mitigation apart from the heal, and you still don't have any form of mobility whatsoever. The question is just the dynamics of playstyle. This character does one thing still relatively well, and gets countered by anything that doesn't cater to that one thing. I had a game yesterday, I think it was like a Kiriko Mercy, it was something, basically a composition with 0 crowd control, and it just felt like I just dominated the entire lobby. Like, I just basically did whatever I want. I walked around, they couldn't interrupt my heal, they couldn't stop my heal, they couldn't do enough damage to burst me down. But then there were certain circumstances and certain maps where I just had to basically just be a sponge and just hope that I could flank or avoid or hide or bait. And it just felt miserable. And the swing, I literally made the enemy tank rage quit one game I played on Midtown. They actually rage quit the game after because I had hooked them like 3 or 4 times in a row and killed them because they didn't play correctly or they didn't have the right comp or they didn't have the right situation or the map was good for me or my cover usage was really good. And then there are other times where I was just like, I literally did not know what to do. And even in the games where we won, it felt really, really, really bad. So the whole point of game design is not to necessarily just make a balanced game, but to also make a game that feels engaging and fun to play for both sides. And I feel like Roadhog is still a terrible offender when it comes to missing the mark totally when it comes to this aspect of fun. So overall, I'm unsure on his power spike. I'm not sure how powerful the character is going to be. I do feel that he might be a teeny bit stronger in the right hands. But overall, again, power spike is not the problem here. We've had a very, very powerful iteration of the previous Roadhog, but that wasn't fun to play. So I don't think that that's what we necessarily want to only be looking at. For example, current Sombra, I don't feel is very strong-ish. She certainly has a very low value floor, but was overall, I think, a relatively successful rework, especially once they made some, especially if they will make some of the quality of life changes. So it's going to be meta and very situation dependent. The question really isn't is Roadhog stronger? That's not really the question. The question is Roadhog design good, healthy, fun for the game for both the people playing with and playing against Roadhog, and also just the people playing Roadhog. Now, some of you might be asking, Roadhog's fine. He's fine. He's a niche character. He does the thing that we like to do, and the hook one shot, and then just leave him as it is. And I would agree with that. I think there's a certain level of philosophy where if we just want characters like Bastion and Junkrat and Roadhog to just be stupid, niche, goofy characters that are fun in their certain situations, maybe not so good in high ranks, that's fine. There's an argument against that. Not going to get into that in this video, but sure, I can understand that. But then why rework? If this is all we're going to have, then why are we devoting developer resources and making this big announcement, and then this is what we have? So here's a solution. I have had a complete support rework project, a complete DPS rework project, where we reworked a lot of the more problematic DPS and support characters. You can find those videos. I'll link those in the description, in the comments. And you guys help me out with those. I'm not smart enough myself to answer all these questions by myself. I'm a good critic, but I sometimes struggle to come up with good ideas. But what we did is we took hundreds of messages in my Discord, people submitting their ideas for Mercy and Moira and Junkrat and Pharah. And we came up with, I think, some pretty good solutions for these characters. I don't have an inner track to the devs whatsoever, but again, I don't want to criticize and critique without providing something better. So this Saturday, we're going to start the tank rework / balance project. So please check out my Discord link in the description and check out the hashtag tank rework and balance discussion. It's going to be in the Discord in the Overwatch category. And drop your ideas for the Roadhog rework. We're also going to be talking about Orisa, we're going to talk about Wrecking Ball, Doomfist, Diva, and Ramatra actually as well. Some minor tweaks for those characters, mostly focusing on Roadhog and a little bit of Orisa, about what do we need to do to make these characters a little bit more interesting. Let's not be stupid here, guys. I don't think that many of these changes are going to go through, but I think it's a fun project. And like I said, personally, I don't like giving criticism without offering some sort of thing that I think will be better. And that's what the focus of this next project is going to be on. Is it a grapple hook? I don't know, guys. What do you guys think of this Roadhog needs? So that's all I've really got for today, guys. Hate to be so negative in a video. I feel like the last couple of videos have been a little bit negative. But again, I do want to point out that there's been a lot of really good positive things with the Overwatch 2 recently. It's just with the balance specifically and the reworks. Compared to the summer rework, this one looks really quite bad. But yeah, I hate being negative, but it is what it is. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I'll chat with you later.